Okay, so we're back here. This is part 2 of reading files in. So I figured out why why I wasn't able to see my working directory. I just had it plugged into the wrong port. It's something as simple as that. So I'm going to go up here, right? We already know what my current directory is. I'm going to change my directory and get the working directory that I really want, which is over here in this F drive. So go get my data, and I'm going to be looking to get Bibitor data, and I want June 2021. So that's going to be the working directory that I'm going to be looking for. And so I can also, one of the things about Spider that I like, and again, this is my personal preference, is when I want to see what files I have, I can see what files are in here by going down here and clicking on files, and now I can see all the files that are sitting in that working directory, right? And that's, for me, I like to see what I've got. That way, if I can make sure that I'm typing in exactly what the file name is, and I can see that these are CSVs, these are zip files, these are pictures, bar charts, and things of that nature. Okay, so we're gonna just see what my working directory is. You can see that's my working directory, which is the same up here. And now I'm going to also import pandas as PD. All right. So now and the file that we're going to use is the biggest file that exists in all of these data sets. It's the sales file. You can't tell how big it is here, but it's around, well, let's take a look at how big it really is. So we are going to start, we're going to read in the sales file. Okay, this is a .csv file, and it is enormous. If this were an Excel file, this were an Excel file, you would replace the code up here, right, which is read underscore CSV, so PD read underscore CSV. If it was an Excel file, you would replace the underline CSV with underline Excel. Okay, very simple. In these files, you may be tempted to want to open them in Excel. Please don't, right? These CSV files are too big. Excel can only handle 1,048,576 records. You're going to see how big these are shortly. Okay, so let's create our first data frame. I'm going to abbreviate this DF, and you'll see that DF used a lot, even when you're looking up things on how to do certain stuff on Stack Overflow or on GitHub, etc. So okay, so we're going to set our DF. So we're going to use pandas PD read underscore CSV, and now we're going to put in the file name. And the file name, I can go over here and make sure I get the right file name. salesfinal.csv. So that's what I want. Sales final, and it has to be exactly right. 6302021.csv. All right. And then we're going to run that. Now, it's going to take a little while, right? You see this little red that, you know, if you want to stop this from reading in, but this command is taking time to read in all this data of this particular file, this sales final file. So you just got to be patient, especially when you're dealing with large data. And that's also going to be the case when you are doing any manipulation of these large data sets. You need to be patient. So it's going, it's looking at, trying to see where to get it. And while it's working, I can also type in df head, and what that's going to do what that's going to do, df.head is a function that shows the first 5 observations in the data frame. Okay, so the data frame is composed of 3 different components. Okay, there's the index, which is the index of the rows, right? So it's index of the rows. There are columns, right? Labels. And there are values. And that's the data, okay? This is now read in. Let's go and take a look at variable view and see what we have, and then we'll run df head. So variable explorer, here it is. There are 14, remember this is rows and columns, There are 14 variables, 14 columns, and there are 13,568,238 rows. I told you, these things are huge. We run df head and we can see what this data looks like. This is what it looks like. So it's got an inventory ID. The problem with this is it kind of cuts it out. And no matter what you do, it's always going to be that short little thing here. So if I really want to know what are my labels, I think I can just go in and say df labels and tell me what are, nope, that's not how to do it. Let's see, how can I get, maybe it's df columns. Let's look at that. And I forgot my little period here, period. And we need, there we go, let's try that. Let's see if it gives us that information. Nope, that's not going to give it to me either. Okay, so we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute. So figure out how to get what our columns are. All right, so as I said, the first 5 items show you what's in the data set. To determine the data frame index, columns, and values, we simply use the following code. The index and the columns are helpful in understanding the breadth and depth of your data frame. Okay, so let's make sure we do this right. Okay. Okay, so first we want to put in, we have to figure out what's our index, all right? So our index, so df index, no parentheses, will give us what our index is. And over here we see our index is start at 0 and stop at 13,568,238, all right? I want to figure out what my columns are. We go df columns. Before I was typing in the parentheses, you don't put in the parentheses, just type in df columns. All right, and these are your columns. So we have inventory ID, Store, brand, description, size, sales quantity, sales dollar, sales price, sales date, volume, classification, excise tax, vendor number, and vendor name. All of these are data type object. Okay, the indexes are data type object. And then we can also put in DF values. Again, no parentheses, and run that, and this will give us an understanding about what the values are. So again, it takes a little while. While that's working, here we go, our DF values. It's really, again, there's so much going on, it's hard to tell that what's happening here, right? Because it's just giving you this whole huge array of data, right? And all these dots are just giving you abbreviated information. All right, so what did we learn by doing this? Well, we know the index starts at 0, as we saw when we were looking at NumPy arrays. Lists and series. In this data set, the number of rows is over 13.5 million. Understanding your data is critical. Understanding what's in everything, what are the values that each thing takes, that's important. Knowing what the variables are, columns, and the type of variable. Is it a floating variable, an integer, a string, a date, good to know. Helps in the development of logic. Another interesting command to understand your data is, well, it's the following. It's dataframe.info, and that does have a parentheses. So whatever the data frame name is, .info, or dataframe.shape. Okay, so let's run both of these. So let's go df, that's our data frame info, and put the parentheses around it, and let's see what we get. All right, so this is really much better information. So it tells us, here's our data variables, 14 variables starting with 0. Inventory ID, it's an object. Store, it's an integer. Brand, it's an integer. Brand, I don't know, should that be an integer, or maybe we should convert that to a string? Description, it's a string or an object. Size, okay. Sales quantity, integer. Sales dollars, a float. Sales price, float. Okay, that makes sense. Sales date, object. Maybe we want to convert that to a date. Volume's an integer, classification's an integer, and should that be an integer? excise tax float, okay. Vendor number integer, right? Again, when I think of integers, should these things like you can add, subtract, divide? No. So I always look at those as maybe those should be strings. But let's put the other one in, right? df shape and no parentheses. After that, let's take a look at what the shape is. And it tells us exactly what the shape is. But we already know that by looking at the variable view. Right? We already know that. Okay. So when you examine the information about your data frame, evaluate whether your data types, those are also referred to as, you see it here, D type, are correct for the specific column. In this example, we just went through it, right? A number of the columns were categorized as objects. Most strings are classified as objects. One column that imported as an object was sales date. Was the sales date. For analysis, the sales date of transactions for a company may be important. As a result, the variable should be changed to a time variable. All right. So, okay, how do I do that? Well, in Google, I searched for the following thing: formatting a date in a Python data frame. That's what I searched for. And I found this link in Stack Overflow. Okay. In the link, and I'll tell you what, let's see. Let's put in that. We'll do it right now. I'm going to show you what it came up with. So we're going to copy that because I didn't list out what the link was, but we're going to copy that. We're going to go into Google. We're going to formatting a date in a Python data frame. And this is the one I found. It's Stack Overflow. How to change the date time format in Pandas. Right? And so this question's been asked 172 times, and 325 people have said this is the right thing to do. And so what I came up with was this piece of code. Okay, df, dob. So we're going to go pd to date time, df, and then whatever the date was, right? So that's what I found. So I'm going to copy that. And we'll go back to so what I found was in that link, I found the useful piece of information. Or useful piece of code. And it was this. That's the code I found. So I took this code and I manipulated it. Right? And this is what I did. So I said, okay, df, right? So I'm using this code. I'm gonna basically copy it again here. So df, it's the same df, but here dob is replaced with sales date. Right? That's my variable of interest, sales date. And so we're gonna keep the same code, pd.to date time, and it's df, right? And in here, we've got to make sure we put in the same item. So I want to put in sales date. Okay. And then when I run df info, again, this sales date should change from an object to a date. Let's see if this works. So let's run this piece of code. All right, it's done it. And now I'm going to run df info and see if my, well, not df info, df columns. That's what I want. Not df info. I want, df info, and then put the brackets around it. Df info. There we go. Now it's changed it to a date time. So after running that code, I've been able to change my D type. And I do the same thing if I wanted to change, say, store away from an integer to a string or an object. I can probably do something very similar as well. So after running this code, the D type changes from an object to a date time 64 NS. Okay. If I wanted the date in a different format, I would just Google that. And use that code. Right? That's how I code, right? Everything's Google, Stack Overflow, and GitHub. So the key to your success as an analyst using whether it's Python or R or whatever is get comfortable with asking Google questions or go to Stack Overflow and GitHub. That's where your success is going to lie.